The words hit me like a physical blow. You old witch. I only put up with you because of my husband. My daughter-in-law, Darla, whispered it to me in the kitchen, right after a family dinner. For a moment, I just stayed, the words hanging heavy in the air between us. But then, a strange, unexpected laugh escaped my lips. Don't worry, I told her, my voice surprisingly calm. You won't be seeing me anymore. The very next day, I changed the locks. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, as usual. Not because I wanted to, but because at 65, sleep had become a fickle, fitful thing. It was a familiar burden, one of many I'd learned to live with. For 5 minutes, I just lay there, gathering my thoughts, the ache in my joints a dull counterpoint to the sharper ache in my heart. Then, with a quiet groan, I sat up on the edge of the bed. My bed, in my room, in my apartment, though sometimes it felt like none of it truly belonged to me anymore. Outside, Haywood was just beginning to stay. The quiet Southgate neighborhood, where I'd lived most of my life, was still wrapped in a morning haze. From my window, I could see the highway, already a crawling ribbon of cars heading towards Oakland and San Francisco. Edward Carr used to be among them, every single morning, for 32 years. Then he was gone, and everything changed. I slipped on my robe and left the room. The apartment had 3 spacious rooms, almost 120 square meters. Edward and I bought it back in the 80s, when California prices weren't quite so insane. We added a second floor, built a patio. We had so many plans, so many hopes. And now, this house, our home, had become a battlefield where I felt like the losing side. The kitchen was clean. I always washed the dishes before bed, no matter how tired I was. Old habits die hard for an emergency room nurse. Order is paramount, especially when chaos reigns around you. I put the kettle on and took out my one small joy, a box of Ceylon tea I'd bought at a shop near my old workplace. Darla, my daughter-in-law, only drank coffee from capsules, and she'd wrinkle her nose whenever I brewed tea. While the water boiled, I started on the pancakes. My son, Terrence, had loved them since childhood. Despite everything, I still made them every Saturday. Maybe it was my way of clinging to at least one family tradition. One thread connecting us to the past, when we were a real family. A door creaked at the back of the apartment. It was Oliver, my youngest grandson. At 14, he was already taller than me, but lanky and awkward, like a young colt. His dark hair was always tousled, his eyes hidden behind long bangs, and headphones seemed permanently glued to his ears. "Good morning, Oliver," I smiled. "Pancakes will be ready in 15 minutes." He nodded, not taking off his headphones, and sat at the kitchen table, his tablet glowing. I stopped taking his behavior personally a long time ago. At least he didn't snap at me like his oldest sister, Rachel. Though I knew Oliver saw and understood everything that was happening in this house better than anyone. "Mom, have you seen my blue sweater?" Rachel burst into the kitchen, already fully dressed and made up despite the early hour. At 17, she was a beautiful echo of her mother. High cheekbones, a straight nose, chestnut hair. But her eyes were Terrence's, brown, soft, inherited from my late husband. "I washed it yesterday, Day. It should be in your closet, on the second shelf." "I already looked there," she snapped, but immediately softened. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm just late for my project group meeting this Saturday morning." I raised an eyebrow as I flipped a pancake. "Veterinary classes, remember? We're doing a project on treating stray animals." I nodded, remembering. Rachel had dreamed of becoming a veterinarian ever since Edward gave her a book about wild animals for her 10th birthday. She was so determined. "Look in the laundry basket in the bathroom," I suggested. "I might have forgotten to hang it up." She rushed off and returned a minute later, sweater in hand. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best," she said, kissing my cheek and grabbing a pancake straight from the pan. "This is so good, Marlene." Darla's sharp voice made me jump. She never called me Mom or even my full name. Just Marlene, as if we were colleagues. She stood in the doorway, hands on her hips. At 39, she looked immaculate, slim, fit, with perfect posture. A manager at a self-service laundry, She always dressed like she was interviewing for a corporate CEO position. Strict pantsuits, blouses, minimal jewelry. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight bun, accentuating her sharp features. "Did you move my things in the bathroom again?" "I just wiped down the shelves. Darla, all your jars are where you left them." "I can't find my hand cream," she squinted. "The one Terrence gave me for our anniversary." "Maybe it's in the bedroom," I suggested cautiously, continuing with the pancakes. "I always keep it in the bathroom," she snapped. "In the right drawer where all my other things are, the ones you're always moving around." Oliver snorted softly behind me, his eyes glued to his tablet. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Mom, I saw your cream on your nightstand," she said, stuffing the last piece of pancake into her mouth. "I've got to go. I'm late." Darla pursed her lips, offering no thank you to either her daughter or me. She simply turned and left, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and unspoken complaints. I placed the finished pancakes on a large plate, setting it on the table next to the maple syrup, another family tradition. Terrence appeared just as I was finishing washing the pan. At 42, with a receding hairline and a small belly, he still looked like the little boy I used to carry in my arms. My only son, my pride and my pain. "Good morning, Mom," he yawned, stretching. "Pancakes. You're a miracle." At moments like these, I wanted to believe that all was not lost, that my boy was still there inside this tired, spineless man who let his wife rule his mother's house. "Your father used to say that Saturday without pancakes wasn't Saturday." I smiled, pouring him a cup of coffee. Terrence nodded without looking up. We both knew he didn't like me talking about Edward. It made him awkward, reminding him of how much things had changed since his death 5 years ago. Darla returned to the kitchen, holding the cream demonstratively. "It was on the nightstand, just like Rachel said," she stated, glancing briefly at me. "Next time, Marlene, don't touch my things, okay? Everyone needs their personal space." I nodded silently, though I wanted to say so much. That my personal space had long been violated, that this apartment was my property, for which I was still paying the mortgage. That I had let them move in after Terrence was laid off, thinking it would be temporary, a year at most, until they got back on their feet. But 3 years had passed. Instead, I poured myself more tea and walked to the window. From the 8th floor, there was a view of the city, the distant hills, and on a clear day, even the bay. Today, a light haze. A typical California morning. "Mom, Darla, and I are going to Roy's birthday party tonight," Terrence said, chewing a pancake and washing it down with coffee. "Will you stay with the kids?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement, as always. They never asked if it was convenient or if I had plans. They just presented me with a calm plea. "Sure," I said, turning to him with a smile. "I've got a new book I wanted to read in peace." "Great," Darla said, taking a yogurt from the refrigerator. "By the way, I noticed you used my shampoo again. The French one. I asked you not to touch it, Marlene. It's expensive, and I buy it especially for my hair." I hadn't touched her shampoo. I had my own regular one from the supermarket. But there was no point in arguing. "I'm sorry, Darla. I won't do it again." She nodded, as if accepting the apology of a vassal, and sat down at the table next to her husband. They began discussing their evening plans, completely ignoring me. I finished my tea, put the cup in the dishwasher, and left the kitchen, relieved to return to my room. As I passed Oliver's room, I heard soft music. He'd returned there right after breakfast. The door was ajar, and I peeked inside. My grandson was at his computer, completely absorbed in a game. His thin shoulders were tense, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Oliver, would you like to go for a walk today? The weather is nice." He toned, taking off his headphones for a second. "I can't, Grandma. I have an online tournament. It's a team game. I can't let the guys down." "I understand." I smiled. He nodded and put his headphones back on. We used to go to the park a lot. I'd show him plants, tell him stories from my ambulance days. But over the last year, he'd become more withdrawn, preferring the virtual world. I didn't blame him. There was constant tension in this apartment. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and pulled an old photo album from the nightstand. I flipped through the familiar pages. Our wedding, Edward and I, Terence's birth. His first steps, school holidays, graduation. Here he is, introducing us to Darla. Young, in love, happy. Here are the first photos of newborn Rachel. Then Oliver. The last pictures with Edward, gray-haired, but still strong and full of life. Who could have known a heart attack would take him so suddenly? After his death, I held on as best I could. I kept working in the ambulance service for 2 more years before retiring. A few months later, Terence lost his job as an engineer at a construction company. He called me right away. "Mom, we need some time to get back on our feet. Can we stay with you? Just for a year, at most." Of course, I agreed. How could I refuse my only son? They sold their house to pay off their debts, which, as I later found out, were mostly gambling debts. Terence had become addicted to sports betting. They moved in. Terence got a job as an operator at an auto parts factory, a significant pay cut. Darla continued at the laundromat. They only had enough money for necessities and the children's education. I didn't ask for rent, only my share of utilities. But gradually, everything changed. Darla started bossing me around, rearranging furniture, commenting on my habits. Terence stayed silent, trying to avoid involvement. At first, I tried to delicately defend my boundaries, but each time it ended in a silent cold war that hurt the children. So, I started giving in. On small things, then on insignificant things, and then on more serious ones. I had the album back in the nightstand when I heard a knock. It was Rachel. She'd come home earlier than expected. "Mom, can I come in?" "Of course, sweetie." She slipped inside, closing the door, then looked around as if to check we were alone. She sat next to me on the bed. "I wanted to apologize for Mom," she said quietly, "for what she said this morning about the shampoo and everything." "It's okay, sweetie. Don't worry about it. But it's not right." Anger flashed in her eyes. "This is your house and she acts like you." She trailed off. "Like I'm a guest who's taking advantage of your hospitality." I suggested gently. Rachel nodded, biting her lip. "I talked to Dad, but he just brushes it off. He says everything's fine, that you like taking care of us." I sighed. Terence had always been a master of self-deception. "You know," I took my granddaughter's hand, "sometimes it's easier for people to ignore problems than to deal with them. Your dad, he's a good man, Rachel, is just afraid of conflict, just like you." She looked me straight in the eye. "Grandma, why do you let them treat you like that? It's your apartment. You could." "What? Kick you all out?" I shook my head. "You're my family. You're all I have left." Rachel hugged me, pressing her cheek against my shoulder. "You know, I've been writing down your stories," she said unexpectedly. "The ones you told me about your work in the ambulance, about the difficult calls, the lives you saved. You were so brave, Grandma. What happened to that woman?" I didn't know how to respond. Where was the Marlene Ricks who rushed into burning buildings without hesitation? Who made life-or-death decisions in seconds? Who wasn't afraid to put arrogant doctors in their place when she was right? Who wore her uniform with pride and knew her own worth? "She's still here," I said, touching my chest. "Just a little tired." Rachel nodded understandingly and stood up. "I have to finish my project, but I wanted you to know that Oliver and I are on your side. Always." When she left, I sat motionless for a long time, staring out the window. Haywood lived its life. An ordinary American town where ordinary families with ordinary problems lived in ordinary houses. There was another knock, this time louder. "Marlene." It was Darla. "I want to wash the curtains in the living room. Can you help me take them down?" I took a deep breath, preparing to leave my refuge and return to a reality where I was not the mistress of the house, but a servant in my own home. "Of course, Darla. I'm on my way." "You know, Marlene, sometimes I don't understand how you can stand it." Lauren Falls stirred vigorously at the sugar in her coffee, though it had long since dissolved. We were in our favorite cafe, the Bluebird, an unremarkable place 2 blocks from the City Library, where Lauren had worked for 27 years. I lowered my eyes, staring at my tea. Unlike at home, it was weak. But at least Lauren was here, the only person I could talk to openly. "It's not that bad." I tried to smile. but it came out unconvincing. Stop it. Lauren narrowed her eyes. At 63, she was as straightforward as she'd been when we met in high school. You're letting them walk all over you in your own home. I sighed, admitting defeat. Lauren always saw right through me. What am I supposed to do? Kick them out? They are my family. Families don't treat each other like that, she said, setting her cup down with such force that drops of coffee splashed. Listen, Marlene, I've known you for 50 years. Where is the woman who once stood up to a drunk bully twice her size for hurting his girlfriend? I smiled involuntarily, remembering. I was 19. Lauren and I were coming back from a dance, and in the parking lot, we saw a big guy pushing a crying girl. Without thinking, I stepped between them. That was a long time ago. I shook my head. We were young and stupid. No, it was brave and right. Lauren leaned forward. Do you remember when you worked in the ambulance? How many lives you saved? How many times you made difficult decisions under pressure? Where is that, Marlene? I closed my eyes, and memories flooded back. 28 years in the ambulance service. First as a paramedic, then as a senior team member. Endless calls, sleepless nights, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and the feeling that I was doing something important. I remembered the highway accident, pulling 5 victims from a wrecked minibus, delivering a baby in a skyscraper elevator during a power outage, using a flashlight, the nursing home fire, rescuing elderly people who couldn't walk. In those moments, I never hesitated, never doubted myself. I knew what to do, and I did it. You were strong. Lauren's voice brought me back. What happened to that woman? She grew old. I smiled bitterly, and she was left alone. Nonsense. Lauren waved her hand. I'm not getting any younger, and my husband died 8 years ago. But I don't let anyone walk all over me, and neither should you. I said nothing, staring out the window at the passing people. Hayward had changed, becoming more crowded and noisy. Or maybe it was me who had changed, becoming quieter and more inconspicuous. Tell me what's going on, Lauren said, pushing a plate of lemon pie towards me. And eat. You've lost weight. I obediently picked up my fork, knowing it was useless to argue. Everything's the same as always. Darla bosses everyone around. Terrence keeps quiet. They treat everything in the house as if it's theirs, but constantly criticize me if I touch their things. Darla criticizes me for every little thing. That I didn't wash the dishes properly. That I listened to the radio too loudly. That I ruined her blouse when I washed it. And Terrence, what does your son say? Nothing. I shook my head. Or he just brushes it off. Mom, you know Darla. She just likes to be in control. As if that's an excuse. Lauren snorted. And the kids? How are your grandchildren? My face softened. Rachel understands what's going on. Sometimes she tries to stand up for me, but she has a hard time with her mother. Oliver is withdrawn into his own world. Computer, games, headphones. We used to go for walks and talk a lot. Now he hardly ever leaves his room. This situation is clearly not healthy. Lauren tapped her fingernail on the table. For all of you, you have to do something, Marlene. What exactly? I spread my hands. They've been living with me for 3 years. They don't have money for their own place. If I kick them out, where will they go? You don't have to kick them out. Lauren rolled her eyes. But you need to set boundaries. It's your home, and you deserve respect. Remind them of that. I was silent, thinking. Something stirred inside me, the same determination I had once known. But it quickly faded, overwhelmed by the fear of being completely alone. I'll think about it, I finally said. I promise. Lauren snorted skeptically but changed the subject, talking about the new computer system at the library and how it was driving everyone over 40 crazy. I got home around 5 o'clock in the evening, loaded down with groceries. Terrence usually did the shopping, but today he was working overtime. At least, that's what he said. The apartment was unusually quiet. Oliver's door was closed. He was probably playing again. Rachel, judging by a note on the refrigerator, had gone to a friend's house to study. Muffled voices came from Terrence and Darla's bedroom. I quietly went into the kitchen and started unpacking. Are you serious, Terrence? 12,000. Darla's voice was laced with anger, even through the closed door. That's all our savings. I froze, listening. I knew it was wrong to eavesdrop, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I was sure the Lakers would win. Terrence's voice sounded pathetic. They had a great winning streak. I don't care about their winning streak. Darla was almost shouting. We saved that money for a down payment on a house, to finally get out of here. I covered my mouth with my hand. $12,000. Terrence lost $12,000 gambling. I'll win it back. I promise. His voice sounded desperate. I have a system. I just started using it. A system. Darla's hysterical laughter rang in my ears. Your system got us into your mother's house 3 years ago. I thought you'd given it up after last time. Listen, honey, Terrence said more quietly, trying to calm her. I'll pay it all back. I've been offered extra shifts at the factory, and I can ask my mom. No. Darla snapped. I've had enough of your favors. I'm not going to be even more dependent on your mother. I carefully placed the bag of vegetables on the table, trying not to make a sound. My heart pounded. Terrence was down again. He'd lied to me again. There was no overtime. He was probably at some bookmaker's office, blowing the last of the family savings. The bedroom door flew open, and I barely had time to turn towards the refrigerator, pretending to put groceries away. Darla flew out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. Oh, Marlene. She stopped when she saw me. You're back already. Her eyes were red, either from crying or anger. Her hair was tousled, cheeks flushed. I'd never seen her so distraught. I just got home. I smiled as naturally as I could. I bought everything for dinner. I thought I'd make a tuna casserole. Terrence loves it. Darla stared at me for a few seconds, as if she didn't understand. Then she shook her head. Do whatever you want, she said. I'm leaving. Don't wait for me for dinner. She grabbed her bag and jacket from the coat rack and rushed out, slamming the door behind her. I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Terrence came out of the bedroom, pale, a blank look on his face. He stopped in the kitchen doorway, hesitating to come in. You heard everything, didn't you? He asked quietly. I nodded, seeing no point in pretending. 12,000, Terrence. My voice trembled. How could you? He lowered his eyes, and I saw not a 42-year-old man, but a little boy who'd broken the neighbor's window with a ball, afraid to admit it. I thought I'd get lucky this time, he muttered. I studied the statistics, calculated everything. Don't do this anymore, I said, reaching out and taking his hand. Please, Terrence, you're destroying yourself and your family. He nodded, still not looking at me. I know. I'll quit. I promise. This time for sure. We both knew it was a lie. He'd promised the same thing after every loss. And yet, he always returned to gambling as soon as he had money. Go rest, I said, gently pushing him towards the room. I'll call you when dinner is ready. Left alone, I mechanically continued cooking, but my thoughts were far away. Lauren's words echoed. You let them walk all over you. And now this. Terrence had lost everything, and Darla was furious. I knew from experience that her anger would inevitably spill over onto me. The weakest link in their eyes. Rachel returned around 7, lively and full of energy. Hi, Mom. She kissed my cheek. How was your day? Did you see Lauren? Yes, we had a nice time. I smiled, not wanting to burden her with my problems. How's your test prep going? Great. I think I'm ready. She peeked into the oven. Tuna casserole. Where's Mom? She went out. I shrugged. She said not to wait for her for dinner. Rachel frowned. Did they fight with Dad again? I heard her yelling this morning. I hesitated, not knowing what to say. I didn't want to make Terrence look bad, but I didn't want to lie either. They had a disagreement, I finally said. I think they need some time to cool off. Rachel nodded understandingly. It wasn't the first time her parents had argued. I'll go get Oliver for dinner, she said, heading for her brother's room. Dinner was spent in tense silence. Terrence barely touched his food, though he usually devoured my casserole. Oliver, as always, was lost in his own thoughts, and Rachel tried to lighten the mood with school stories, but quickly gave up, sensing the general atmosphere. After dinner, I sent the children to do their homework and started washing dishes. Terrence silently helped clear the table and went to the living room to watch TV, his usual refuge from problems. Darla returned around 10 o'clock. I had just finished ironing and was about to go to bed. Hearing the front door open, I froze, expecting another outburst. But instead, I heard a woman's laughter. Darla was not alone. "Come in, Nancy." My daughter-in-law's voice sounded relaxed, even cheerful. Terrence is probably already asleep, and the old woman is unlikely to stick her nose out of her room. I stood frozen in my bedroom doorway, not daring to come out. The old woman, was she talking about me? Are you sure? The second voice sounded uncertain. "It's late. I don't want to disturb anyone." "Come on, it's my house." Darla dismissed me. "I can invite whoever I want, whenever I want." I bit my lip, feeling a wave of indignation rise. Her house. After 3 years of living off me, she considered this apartment hers. How is it living with your husband's mother? Nancy's voice sounded curious. "Isn't it cramped?" I heard them go into the kitchen, glasses clinking. Darla must have gotten the wine. "It's temporary." Darla's voice was confident. "We've almost saved up for the down payment on our own house." Lies. After Terrence's loss today, they had nothing left. But of course, it's not all sunshine and roses. Darla continued, lowering her voice, but I could still hear every word in the silent apartment. "Marlene sticks her nose everywhere, moves our things around, and constantly lectures the kids, especially Rachel. She's already like a grandmother." "I feel for you," Nancy said. "My mother-in-law was a real pain in the neck until she moved to Florida. Best decision of her life." They both laughed, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. So, that's how it was. Was I a pain in the neck to them? A nuisance? "The hardest part is pretending to appreciate all her favors," Darla said, clearly making air quotes. "Her dinners, her laundry, her cleaning, as if we couldn't manage without her. Why put up with it?" Nancy sounded genuinely puzzled. "Why not just move out?" "Money," Darla sighed. "You know how much housing costs in Hayward these days. And since Terrence got demoted at work." She trailed off. "Anyway, we have to put up with the old bag, but it won't be for long. I promise." The old bag. That's how she saw me. That's what I'd become in my own home. I quietly closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Years of working in an ambulance had taught me to hold back emotions until the right moment. I looked at my hands, wrinkled with protruding veins, but still strong. Hands that had held newborns and closed the eyes of the dying. Hands that had stitched wounds and set broken bones. Hands that, according to Darla, were now nothing more than a tool for serving her family. "You let them walk all over you." Lauren's voice echoed in my head, and for the first time in a long time, I admitted she was right. I had let it happen. I had become invisible in my own home, an old burden. Something cracked inside me, like ice on a river in spring. A thin, barely noticeable crack. But I knew that cracks like that had a tendency to grow. The week after I overheard the conversation dragged on agonizingly. I tried to act normal. I made breakfast, cleaned the apartment, did the laundry. All the daily rituals that had long since become second nature. But something had fundamentally changed inside. Darla's words, "old burden," rang in my ears every time I saw her. Terrence was depressed and silent. Darla pointedly ignored him at dinner, talking only to the children. I noticed Rachel and Oliver exchanging worried glances, sensing the growing tension. On Friday evening, I was finishing dusting the living room when I heard the front door slam. Darla had come home from work earlier than usual, and something in her gait, in the energetic click of her heels on the parquet, told me she had news. "Oh, Marlene, you're here," she said, tossing her bag on the sofa and scanning the room with an appraising glance. "Great. We need to talk." I carefully put down the duster and stood up straight. "Something happened, Darla." "Yes, and something wonderful." She smiled, that special smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I got a promotion. I'm now the manager of the laundry chain in our area." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. That's great news. Yes, the pay is better and the career prospects are better, she said, looking around the room as if assessing the situation. But there's one condition. I have to do some of the work remotely from home. I need a home office. Something stirred inside me, a bad feeling I immediately tried to suppress. Maybe we could remodel part of the living room. I suggested. We could put a desk by the window where the light is good. No, Marlene. She shook her head. I need a separate space where no one will disturb me. I was thinking about your room. I froze, not believing my ears. My room? Yes. She nodded as if it were the most natural suggestion in the world. It's the brightest and most spacious room after Terrence's and mine. And frankly, it's too big for one person, especially with your minimal belongings. My minimal belongings. For years, I had been getting rid of my things to make room for her junk. I had given her shelves in my closets, drawers in my dresses, space in the storage room. And now she wanted to take away my last bit of personal space. Where am I going to sleep? My voice was quiet, almost submissive. We can convert the storage room, Darla shrugged. It's small, but there's enough room for a bed and a nightstand. You only sleep there anyway, right? I felt a wave of anger rising inside me, but years of suppressing my feelings took over. I need to think about it. Darla, I said evenly. These are big changes. Of course, think about it. She smiled condescendingly, as if talking to a child. But I'd like to start rearranging tomorrow. The office furniture will be delivered on Wednesday. She had already ordered it, without even asking me, without discussing it. She just decided that's how it would be. Have you discussed this with Terrence? I asked, hoping my son would at least try to stand up for me. Of course, she dismissed me. He's all for it. This is our chance to finally get back on our feet after recent events. Recent events? That's what she called Terrence's $12,000 loss. I'll talk to him, I said, feeling a strange calmness growing inside me. Not humility, but something else. Something dangerous. Please, Darla shrugged. Just don't take too long to decide. I already ordered the paint for the walls. I think light gray will look great. She turned and walked into the kitchen, leaving me standing in the middle of the living room with a dust rag in my hand. My house, my room, my life, and they were going to change it all without my consent. Terrence came home from work around 7. I was waiting for him in the kitchen, cooking his favorite roast. Darla had gone to a meeting, and the kids were at a friend's house. We were alone, mother and son, like in the old days when Edward was away and Terrence and I would have special evenings with board games and homemade cookies. It smells amazing, Mom. He smiled as he entered the kitchen, but his smile faded when he saw my face. Is something wrong? Darla told me about her promotion, I said, pointing him to a chair. Sit down. Let's talk. He nervously licked his lips but obeyed. Yes, that's great news. Her salary will almost double and she wants to take my room for her office, I interrupted. Is it true that you agreed? Terrence lowered his eyes, and I knew immediately what his answer would be. Mom, it's only temporary, he began to explain. As soon as we save up for the down payment on the house. After you lost $12,000, I shook my head. Terrence, do you realize you're asking me to move into a storage room, a windowless room the size of a closet? We'll make it comfortable, he said, still not looking at me. We'll put in a nice bed, lamps. It's not about the bed, I sighed. It's about respect. This is my house, Terrence. I'm still paying the mortgage on it. I know. He slumped even further. And we're grateful to you for letting us live here. But this is a chance for Darla, for all of us. With her new salary, we can save up for our own place faster. And how long will that take? I looked at my son, trying to see in him the responsible man Edward and I had hoped to raise. A year, 2, 5. When was the last time you did something for yourself instead of just going with the flow and indulging Darla? That's not fair. He finally looked up, and I saw a flash of hurt in his eyes. I'm trying to provide for my family. Yes, I made a mistake with those bets, but I'm working on it. And Darla's promotion is our chance to make things right. By making your mother live in a closet. I shook my head. Terrence, this isn't right. and you know it." He was silent, staring at his untouched roast. I could see the struggle on his face. Part of him knew I was right, but another, stronger part was afraid to stand up to his wife. "I'll talk to Dala," he finally said. "Maybe we can work something out." I knew he wouldn't, or he would pretend to, and then tell me that Dala wouldn't agree, as always. Okay. I nodded, deciding to give him one last chance to show some backbone. Talk to her. The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. Terrence went to the living room to watch TV, and I sat in the kitchen for a long time, going over the possible options. The storage room was tiny, about 6 square meters, with no windows and a single light bulb. The prospect of spending the rest of my life there was depressing. But what depressed me most was the thought of having to part with things that wouldn't fit, especially the vinyl record collection Edward and I had spent a lifetime putting together. More than 200 albums, from classic jazz to 60s rock and roll. There would definitely be no room for them in the storage room. The next morning, I woke to the sound of furniture being moved. Peeking out of my room, I saw Dala and Terrence in the living room, moving the sofa against the wall. "What's going on?" I asked, wrapping my robe around me. "We're getting ready to rearrange the furniture." Dala smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "Terrence said you discussed everything yesterday." I looked at my son, who carefully avoided my gaze. "We talked," I said slowly, "but I didn't give my consent." "Oh." Dala straightened up, the smile gone. "I thought it was settled. The office furniture is being delivered on Wednesday, and we wanted to start repainting the room today." "I haven't decided yet, Dala." I crossed my arms. "This is a big change. I need time." "There's no time," she snapped. "I need to start working from home on Monday. If the room isn't ready, I could lose this opportunity." "Mom," Terrence finally looked at me. "Please, this is very important to us." I felt anger rising inside me. They didn't even ask me. They just decided everything, confident I would give in again. "I need to think about it," I said firmly. "Don't touch anything in my room until I've made a decision." "But," Dala began. "No." I raised my hand, stopping her. "It's my room, in my house. I have a right to think about this." Without waiting for a response, I went back to my room and closed the door. My heart was pounding. For the first time in a long time, I had openly defied Dala, and it felt liberating. I spent the whole day thinking. Part of me wanted to give in, as always, for the sake of peace. Another part, the determined Marlene from the past, rebelled against yet another humiliation. By evening, I still hadn't made a final decision. Around 6 o'clock, there was a knock. Rachel stood there with a cup of tea. "I brought you some chamomile," she said, handing me the cup. "Can I come in?" I nodded. "I heard what's going on," she said, sitting on the bed. "It's not fair, Mom. They can't evict you to the storage room." "They think they can," I said with a bitter smile. "And to be honest, I've led them to believe that I'll give in to any argument. But not this time, right?" Rachel looked at me. "Hopefully, you won't agree." I sighed, looking at the records lining the wall. Each one held memories. Edward and I dancing to Frank Sinatra on our first anniversary. Little Terrence falling asleep to Ella Fitzgerald. Our family game nights with Beatles records playing. "I don't know," I said. "Honestly, I don't want to cause any trouble." "Come on." Rachel took my hand. "They're the ones causing trouble, not you. This is your home." At that moment, the door swung open without a knock. Dala stood in the doorway with a tape measure. "Oh, you're here," she said, glancing quickly at us. "Rachel, go help your father with the boxes in the living room." "What boxes?" "For your things." Dala entered the room and began measuring the wall. I decided not to waste any time. "We'll start packing tomorrow so we can paint the walls on Sunday." I didn't give my consent, Dala. My patience was running out, and I asked you not to touch my room. "Marlene," she sighed with feigned patience. "We can't wait forever. We have to make a decision now." "And I've made mine," I said firmly. "The answer is no. I'm not moving into the closet." Dala froze with the tape measure. Rachel held her breath. "What do you mean, no?" Dala slowly turned to me. "This is not up for discussion. I need an office, and I need this room." I met her gaze, unflinching. Find another solution. Like what? Darla crossed her arms. Convert Rachel's room or Oliver's. They are children. They need space to study. And I don't need space. I felt a wave of indignation. Am I not a person? You're retired, Darla snapped. What are you going to do in such a big room? Stay at the ceiling? The closet is plenty big enough for you. Rachel gasped at such blunt rudeness. Mom, how can you say that? Mind your own business. Darla shot her daughter an angry look. Go to your father. No. Rachel stood next to me. I'm staying with Grandma. This is her room, and you have no right to kick her out. Terence appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. What's going on here? He looked from his wife to his daughter and mother. Your mother refuses to move, Darla said dryly. She says she needs this room. For what? I wonder. For this junk. She pointed to the shelves with records. It's not junk. I took a step forward, feeling something break inside me. This is Edward's and my collection. Our life, our memories. Edward's been gone for 5 years. Darla rolled her eyes. It's time to move on. These records are just gathering dust. You could sell them. I think some of them are worth a lot of money. Sell them? I felt the blood drain from my face. You want to sell my records? Why not? Darla shrugged. No one listens to them anyway, and we need the money. You always need money, I shook my head, but not at the expense of my memories. Darla, Terence interjected uncertainly. Maybe we can really find another solution. Mom's records. Oh, God. Don't start. Darla interrupted him. I thought we had discussed everything. We need this office. It's our chance to finally get out of the debt you got us into. Don't talk like that in front of the children. Terence paled. What am I supposed to say? Pretend everything is fine. Darla raised her voice. We need money. I need an office, and I'm going to get it, even if I have to take all this junk to the dump. She grabbed one of the records from the shelf, a Ray Chet Baker album that Edward had given me on our last anniversary. No. I lunged forward, trying to grab the record. Don't you dare touch it. Or what? Darla stepped back, holding the record above her head. What are you going to do, Marlene? Kick us out? She laughed. Come on, we all know you're too scared to be alone. You're only still living here because we put up with you. The silence that followed was deafening. I froze, unable to believe my ears. Terence stared at his wife with wide eyes. Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth. What did you say? My voice sounded unrecognizably calm. You heard me. Darla lowered her hand from the record, but didn't put it back. It's time to face the truth. This is our home now. We live here. We're raising our children here. And you? You're just an old woman clinging to the past and preventing us from moving forward. Darla. Terence finally found his voice. You're crossing the line. No, she's crossing the line. Darla pointed her finger at me. By refusing to give up the room we need. Selfish old. I raised my hand, stopping the flow of insults. Something inside me had changed. It was as if a wall had come crashing down, holding back everything I had been feeling for the last few years. You're right about one thing, Darla. It's time to face the truth. I looked around the room. My room. In my apartment. The apartment I was still paying for with my modest pension. The apartment where I had allowed my daughter-in-law to boss me around. Humiliate me. Treat me like a servant. This is my home, I said quietly but firmly. My apartment. The one I pay for. The one I let you move into 3 years ago out of pity, because you couldn't afford to rent anywhere after Terence lost all his money gambling. Darla paled but continued to stare defiantly. So what? You can't kick us out. You can't live alone. You're afraid of being alone. You need us more than we need you. That's not true. I shook my head. I managed on my own for 2 years after Edward died. I can manage now. I looked at Terence, who stood pale and confused, not knowing whose side to take. I put up with all this because you're my family, I continued. I thought I was helping you, but I was wrong. I wasn't helping. I was letting you use me, and that ends now. I walked over to Darla and gently but firmly took the record out of her hands, putting it back on the shelf. No one touches my things, I said. No one is taking my room. And if you don't like it, then you'll have to find another place to live. After our argument, an oppressive silence fell over the apartment. Darla shot me a withering glance, went into her bedroom, and slammed the door. Terence stood in my doorway, clearly wanting to say something, but unable to decide what. He simply shrugged and followed his wife. Rachel hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Grandma," before going to her room. Even Oliver, who usually never left his room, opened his door crack and looked at me with a new expression, either surprise or respect. I was left alone, my heart pounding and my hands shaking, but strangely calm. It was as if I had shed a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. It was late, around 11 o'clock, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. Instead, I took out an old photo album from the bottom drawer of my dresser and sat on the bed. Leafing through the pages, I immersed myself in memories. Here we are with Edward, young, smiling, full of hope, standing in front of this very apartment on the day we signed the papers. It was 1987. We were just over 30, and Terence was 5. He was holding our hands, so small, with tousled hair and a crooked smile. His front tooth had just fallen out. "Our home," Edward said, putting his arm around my shoulders. "We did it, Marlene. Our own home." We worked like crazy to save up for the down payment. Edward worked double shifts at the factory, and I worked nights at the hospital. We saved on everything. Ate cheap pasta, bought clothes at thrift stores, gave up vacations. But it was worth it. The feeling when you walk into your home, knowing no one can kick you out, is priceless. I turned the page. Here we are fixing up the living room. Edward painting the walls, paint splattered on his jeans. I'm washing the windows in a headscarf. And Terence, lugging small tools with an important look on his face. We did all the renovations ourselves, without hiring workers. We saved every dollar, but what fun we had. We turned the music up loud, sang, danced with paintbrushes and mops, took breaks to eat pizza we ordered despite our frugality. Little celebrations in the midst of our busy workdays. The next photo was our housewarming party. Friends, relatives, colleagues crowded into the living room. Everyone brought gifts. Some brought curtains, some pots, some flower pots. Lauren, there she is in the corner with a glass of wine, laughing at someone's joke, gave us the first record for our future collection, Bob Dylan's Time Out of Mind. "Start with the classics," she said. And so we did. Every month, no matter how tight money was, we bought one new record. It was our ritual. After payday, we would go to the music store and spend a long time choosing, consulting each other. Jazz, rock, blues, classical. Our collection grew, reflecting our changing tastes and moods. I closed the album and walked over to the record shelves. I ran my fingers along the spines, reading the familiar titles. Each one was a piece of my life with Edward. Our first years in this apartment, Terence's birth, his growing up, our family holidays, and quiet evenings when we just sat in the living room, listening to music and talking about everything under the sun. Edward always said that music was the language of the soul. He loved jazz more than anything, especially Miles Davis and Chet Baker. I was more of a fan of classic rock and folk, Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, Joni Mitchell. But we found compromises, discovered new things together, created our own musical world. And now Darla wanted to throw it all away, or sell it like junk, like useless trash, to make room for her office in my house. I went back to the bed and sat down, looking out the window at Hayward at night. The city lights twinkled in the darkness, reflecting the stars. Edward loved that view. Sometimes in the evenings, we would just stand at the window, hugging each other and looking at the city. Imagine how many lives, how many stories are unfolding right now behind each of those windows, he would say. What would he say if he could see what our family had become after his death? What would he advise me to do? I knew the answer. Edward always taught Terence to respect others and take responsibility for his actions. He would not approve of how his son allowed his wife to treat me, and he certainly wouldn't have stayed silent if someone tried to evict him from his own bedroom. How did I let things get this far? The thought haunted me, forcing me to relive and analyze the events of the past few years. After Edward's death, I was devastated. A sudden heart attack took him at 64. He didn't even get to retire. Didn't see Rachel go to high school. Didn't live to see Oliver's birth. It was so unfair, so painful, that I felt numb. For the first year, I just existed. Going to Wyke, coming home, going through the motions. Terrence and his family visited every weekend, bringing food, helping with cleaning, keeping me company. I was grateful for their support. And then, when Terrence lost his job, I didn't hesitate to offer them to move in with me. It seemed like the perfect solution for everyone. They wouldn't have to pay rent, and I wouldn't be alone. Plus, I would be able to spend more time with my grandchildren. At first, everything went well. Darla cooked. Terrence helped with repairs and heavy housework, and the children filled the apartment with life and laughter. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the balance of power began to shift. At first, it was little things. Darla rearranged the kitchen furniture for her convenience without asking my opinion. Then she started buying foods I never ate, explaining they were better for me. Then the daily routine began to revolve around their schedule, not mine. And at some point, I realized I was asking permission to turn on the TV in my own living room. I let them do it. I justified it to myself. They are young. They have their own lives. I don't want to interfere. It's not important. It's just little things. For the sake of peace. So as not to be alone. But now, looking at it from the outside, I realized I had betrayed myself. And not only myself. I betrayed the memory of Edward, the life we lived, the values we held dear. We would never have allowed anyone to boss us around or set rules in our home. And now Darla wanted to evict me from my own bedroom, sell Edward's record collection, and lock me in a windowless closet. And she had the audacity to say she was putting up with me in my own home. This had to stop. I opened the drawer of my bedside table and took out a folder with documents. The deed to the apartment, the mortgage, the insurance policies. Everything was in my and Edward's names, and after his death, only in mine. Terrence and Darla had no legal claim to this property. They were only here because I allowed them to be, and it was time to remind them of that. I decided that in the morning I would go to the bank and then to a lawyer. I needed to know exactly what rights I had and how I could protect them. No more concessions. No more compromises at the expense of my dignity. With that thought, I finally went to bed, and for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep almost immediately, without the usual tossing and turning and anxious thoughts. The morning greeted me with bright sunshine and unusual silence. I looked out the window. Terrence's car was in the parking lot, which meant they hadn't left. They were probably just avoiding me after yesterday. I quickly got dressed, choosing my best pantsuit, the one I used to wear to important meetings at the hospital. Dark blue, austere, confidence-inspiring. I pulled my hair back into a neat bun and even put on some light makeup. Looking in the mirror, I didn't see a downtrodden grandmother, but a professional, a woman who knew her worth. When I left the room, I found Terrence in the kitchen. He was sitting over a cup of coffee, looking as if he hadn't slept all night. "Good morning," I said in a neutral tone. He flinched and looked up with tired eyes. "Mom, about yesterday." Darla didn't mean it. She was just on edge. "No excuses, Terrence." I poured myself some tea. Darla said exactly what she thinks, and I appreciate her honesty. "Are you going somewhere?" He glanced at my suit. "I have things to do in town," I said, not going into details. "I'll be back for dinner." He nodded, clearly not wanting to continue the conversation. I finished my tea, grabbed my bag, and left the apartment, feeling my resolve grow with every step. My first stop was the bank. My advisor, a young woman named Stephanie, had a professional smile and an attentive gaze. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Ricks?" she asked as we sat down. "I need some information about my mortgage," I said, taking out a folder. "I want to know how much I have left to pay and what my rights are as the sole owner of the property." Stephanie typed something into the computer. "You have a very good credit history, Mrs. Ricks," she remarked. "You've never missed a payment in." She scrolled down the screen. "All 38 years of your mortgage." Impressive. I felt a surge of pride. Edward and I had always been disciplined about finances, and I had continued that discipline after his death. Only 3 payments left, Stephanie said. After that, the apartment will be yours, unencumbered. 3 payments, just 3 months, and the 30-year mortgage we took out with Edward, when we were young parents with dreams for the future, would be paid off. What about my rights? I asked. Can I evict someone from the apartment? Stephanie raised her eyebrows slightly. You are the sole owner, according to the documents. That gives you the full right to decide who can live in your property and who cannot. She recommended I consult a housing lawyer and gave me the contact details of one she knew. An hour later, I was sitting in the office of Richard Donovan, an elderly gentleman with gray temples and a penetrating gaze. So, Mrs. Ricks, let me see if I understand the situation correctly. He looked through the documents. Your son and daughter-in-law have been living in your apartment for the past 3 years without a lease, have not paid any rent, and are now trying to limit your rights as the owner. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief that someone else had articulated it so clearly. And yesterday, my daughter-in-law said that I only live there because they tolerate me, I added, even though it's my apartment and I'm still paying the mortgage. Mr. Donovan shook his head. I'm afraid this is a classic case of emotional abuse of an elderly person by relatives, he said. Unfortunately, I encounter such situations more often than I would like. Emotional abuse. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I had never thought of my situation in those terms, but it was true. Constant humiliation, devaluation of my feelings, disregard for my needs. Wasn't that abuse? What are my options? I asked, trying to sound calm. As the owner, you have every right to evict unwanted tenants, the lawyer explained. Even if they are your relatives, the law is on your side. He explained the procedure, a formal notice of eviction, specifying the date by which they must vacate. If they refuse, I could go to court. But I would recommend starting with a conversation, Mr. Donovan added. Explain the situation to them. Let them know that you know your rights and are prepared to defend them. Often that alone is enough to make people reconsider. I nodded, thinking. I didn't want to go to court. After all, they were my son and my grandchildren. But I couldn't go on living in such a humiliating situation. What about the children? I asked. My grandchildren are 17 and 14. I don't want them to suffer. That's a difficult issue, the lawyer admitted. But legally, they are minors and under the care of their parents. If you evict the parents, the children go with them. That was the hardest part. The thought of not seeing Rachel and Oliver every day was painful. But was the current situation any better? Was it good for them to grow up in a home where their grandmother was humiliated and their parents were constantly fighting? I thanked Mr. Donovan for his advice and left his office with a plan of action and a sample eviction notice he had helped me draft. On the way home, I stopped at a cafe to catch my breath and think things over again. I ordered a cup of tea and sat watching the people passing by. Each of them immersed in their own lives, their own problems, their own joys. What did I really want? To evict my son and his family? Or just to regain my self-respect, my dignity, control over my own life? I didn't find the answer over that cup of tea, but I knew for sure that I couldn't go back to the way things were. When I got home, no one was there but Rachel. She was in the living room with a book, but when she saw me, she put it down. Mom, I was worried. You never leave for so long without telling me. I'm sorry, dear. I smiled, touched by her concern. I had some important things to do. I went into the kitchen to prepare dinner, but Rachel followed me. Grandma, I wanted to talk about yesterday. She looked troubled. What Mom said was awful. I'm so ashamed of her. I put down the groceries and turned to my granddaughter. You don't need to be ashamed of your parents' actions, Rachel. But I am. She shook her head. Not just for yesterday, for everything they do to you. It's like you're not a person, just a convenient housekeeper. I could see how hard it was for her to say. A 17-year-old girl shouldn't feel that kind of shame for her parents. I went to a lawyer today, I said, deciding to be honest. I found out my rights as the owner of the apartment. Rachel nodded, not looking surprised. Are you going to evict them? I haven't decided yet, I admitted. But I won't let them treat me the way they have for the past few years. I understand, she said quietly. And and I'll support whatever you decide, even if we have to move away. Her words touched me deeply. This young girl showed more maturity and understanding than her parents. Thank you, Dee. I hugged her. Whatever happens, I'll always be here for you. You know that, right? She nodded, pressing herself against me. I know, and I'll be here for you, too. We stood there for a few minutes, finding comfort in each other. Then, I pulled away and wiped my eyes. I'm going to get changed, I said. Then, I'll make dinner. In my room, I sat on the bed, looking at the shelves of records, the photographs, all the things that made up my life. And I knew that I couldn't let anyone devalue it anymore. I got up and took an old suitcase from the closet, the one Edward and I had used for our only vacation together in Hawaii for our 20th anniversary. I opened it on the bed and began to carefully pack my things. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to put off the conversation any longer. That evening, when the whole family gathered for dinner, I announced my decision. I have some news, I said as everyone began to eat. I'm going to spend a week with Lauren. Terrence froze with his fork in hand. Darla looked up, and Rachel exchanged a quick glance with Oliver. To Lauren's? Terrence asked. That's unexpected. I continued eating calmly. We've been planning to spend some time together for a long time. She recently updated her book collection and wants to show me her new editions. That was half true. Lauren and I had indeed discussed that it would be nice to spend a couple of days together, but we hadn't made any specific plans. However, after consulting with my lawyer, I called my friend and told her everything. She immediately offered to let me stay with her. When are you leaving? Darla's voice betrayed her poorly concealed irritation. Tomorrow morning, I said, spreading butter on my bread as if discussing the most ordinary thing. Tomorrow. Darla put down her fork. But we have plans for the weekend. Who's going to cook? Who's going to look after the kids? I could barely suppress a smile. Of course, the first thought was, who was going to wait on them? They're not babies anymore. Darla, I pointed out. Rachel's 17. Oliver's 14. They can take care of themselves for a few days. And as for cooking, I shrugged. I'm sure you'll do just fine. After all, it's your house, as you recently pointed out. Darla blushed but said nothing, clearly not wanting to start another argument in front of the children. Terrence looked confused. Are you sure, Mom? Maybe you could reschedule. I'm swamped at work, and we'll be home late. No, Terrence. I shook my head. My plans are already set. Lauren is waiting for me, and I want to take a break after everything that's happened recently. There was an awkward pause. Everyone knew what everything referred to. Okay, Terrence finally said. Of course, Mom. You need a break. We'll manage. Rachel caught my eye across the table and nodded slightly. She understood and supported me. I can cook, she offered. While you're away, Mom, I know all your recipes. Thank you, Dee. I smiled at her. But don't overdo it. You have enough to do. The rest of dinner passed in tense silence. Darla dug into her plate demonstratively, barely touching her food. Terrence looked lost, like a child who had suddenly realized his parents were not all-powerful and wouldn't always be there. Oliver, as usual, quickly finished his meal and asked permission to leave the table to return to his computer games. Only Rachel behaved normally, talking about school news and weekend plans. After dinner, I retired to my room to finish packing. I was carefully folding clothes into my suitcase when there was a knock. It was Terrence. Can I come in? He shifted uncertainly in the doorway. Of course, I said, gesturing for him to enter. He came in, looked around as if seeing my room for the first time, and sat on the edge of the bed. Mom, I wanted to apologize, he began, for Darla, for myself, for everything that happened. I continued packing without looking at him. You know, Terrence, apologies only matter when they are followed by change. I understand, he said, lowering his head. And I promise everything will change. We'll find another solution with Darla's office. She'll talk to her boss. It's not about the office, I finally turned to him. It's about respect, about understanding boundaries, about realizing that this is my home and I deserve to be treated like a human being in it. Terrence nodded, still not looking up. I know, and I'm to blame. I should have stopped this a long time ago. Yes, you should have, I agreed. But you chose the path of least resistance. As always. He flinched at those words, and I felt a little sorry for him. My son had always been weak-willed, preferring to give in to avoid conflict since he was a child. Edward had tried to teach him to stand up for himself, but apparently it was just a character trait that couldn't be changed. I'll change, he said with unexpected determination. I'll prove to you that I can be different. Okay, I nodded. I'll wait. He stood up, clearly wanting to say something else, but changed his mind and just hugged me briefly, awkwardly, as he hadn't hugged me in years. Have a good trip, Mom, he said, and left. I closed the door behind him and went back to packing, wondering if he would really keep his promise. Part of me wanted to believe he would, but another, more realistic part, doubted it. Too many times he had said one thing and done another. Early in the morning, while everyone was still asleep, I finished packing and called a taxi. I left a note in the kitchen, reminding them of simple things: to water the flowers, feed the fish, set the dishwasher. The usual household chores they would surely forget without my reminders. Lauren greeted me with open arms. Welcome to the Resistance headquarters. She laughed, helping me with my suitcase. You finally did it, Marlene. I'm proud of you. Her house, a small but cozy cottage in a quiet neighborhood in Hayward, was the complete opposite of my apartment. Books everywhere, bright pillows, unusual souvenirs from her travels, paintings by local artists. There was no hint of the primness or strict order that Darla valued so much. The guest bedroom is yours. Lauren showed me a small but bright room overlooking the garden. Make yourself at home. Then we'll have some wine and make plans for revenge. I laughed, feeling the tension of the last few days begin to melt away. No revenge, just justice. Boring, she winked. But I'll support whatever you decide. The week at Lauren's flew by. We went to movies, a museum, a concert in the park. We cooked dinner, played board games, discussed books. It was as if I had returned to the time when I was just Marlene, a woman with her own interests, opinions, and desires. Not a grandmother, not a housekeeper, not a ghost in my own home. Every evening, Rachel called me to tell me how things were going. According to her, Darla was furious that I had left, but tried not to show it. Terrence was spending more time at work than at home. And Oliver, to everyone's surprise, started helping out, washing dishes, taking out the trash, even cooking dinner on Sunday. He misses you, Grandma, Rachel said, although he'll never admit it. That warmed my heart. I miss my grandchildren, too. Despite everything, they were part of my life, my family. The day before I returned, I met with Mr. Donovan, my lawyer. We discussed the next steps, and he handed me the official eviction notice, drawn up in accordance with all legal requirements. 30 days, he said. By law, you must give them at least 30 days to move out. If they don't leave within that time, we'll go to court. I read the document carefully. It was written in dry legal language, without emotion. Simply a statement of fact that I, as the property owner, was demanding the living space be vacated within 30 days. Are you sure you want to do this? Mr. Donovan asked, noticing my pensive expression. It's not too late to change your mind. I shook my head. No, I'm sure it's necessary. He nodded and shook my hand. You're a strong woman, Mrs. Ricks. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. On the day I returned, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and determination. On one hand, I knew I was doing the right thing. On the other, I was afraid of the reaction of my son, my daughter-in-law, even my grandchildren. Was I being too cruel? Was I destroying our family for good? As if reading my mind, Lauren hugged me before I left. Remember, Marlene, she said, you're not destroying your family. They did that with an attitude toward you. You're just restoring justice and your dignity. I nodded, grateful for her support, and got into the taxi that would take me home. Rachel opened the door when she saw me. She lit up and rushed to hug me. Grandma, finally, we missed you so much. Oliver appeared behind her, still as awkward as ever, his bangs falling over his eyes, but this time without headphones. Hi, Mom, he said, and to my surprise, hugged me too, though more reserved than his sister. I missed you, too. I smiled, touched by their reunion. How did you manage without me? We survived. Rachel rolled her eyes. Mom tried to cook, but let's just say we ordered a lot of takeout. I laughed and walked into the apartment. The first thing I noticed was the mess. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was noticeable. Things out of place, dust on the shelves, dirty dishes in the sink. Everything I usually kept tidy without even thinking about it. Are Mom and Dad home? I asked, taking off my coat. Dad's in the living room, Rachel replied. Mom's at work, but she should be back soon. I nodded and headed for the living room. Terrence was sitting on the sofa, absent-mindedly flipping through TV channels. Hearing my footsteps, he looked up. Mom! He jumped up. You're back. As you can see, I smiled, noticing how tired he looked. How are you? Fine, he shrugged. Did you have a good rest? Wonderful. I sat in the chair opposite him. Lauren says, hi. We haven't had such a good time in a long time. Terrence nodded, clearly not knowing what else to say. An awkward pause ensued. Is Darla still at work? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Yes, she's working late today. Terrence rubbed his neck, a gesture he always made when nervous. She's very busy with her new promotion. I understand, I nodded. When she gets back, we need to talk, all of us. Something in my tone made him tense. About what? About our future, I replied simply. About how we're going to live from now on. Terrence lowered his eyes as if he understood where the conversation was going. Okay, he finally said. We'll talk when Darla gets back. I nodded and got up. I'm going to unpack and rest a little from the trip. In my room, I was relieved to find everything untouched. No one had touched my records, moved the furniture, or prepared it for conversion into an office. It was a good sign. Maybe Terrence had really talked to Darla like he said he would. I unpacked my suitcase, took a shower, and changed into fresh clothes. Then I helped Rachel make dinner, just pasta with vegetable sauce. But after a week of deliveries and frozen meals, the kids were thrilled to have a home-cooked meal. Darla came home around 8, after we had finished dinner and cleared the table. She entered the apartment looking like someone carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Oh, Marlene. She nodded when she saw me. You're back. Yes, as promised, I smiled. How was your week? Fine. She hung her coat on the rack. Lots of work. New responsibilities take time. I understand. I nodded. Terrence said you're staying late every day. Yes. She headed for the kitchen. Without an office at home, I have to stay at work longer. A subtle hint I chose to ignore. Can we talk? I asked. All of us. I have some news. Darla turned around, looking at me suspiciously. What news? Let's go to the living room, I suggested, so we don't have to repeat ourselves. She shrugged and followed me. Terrence was already sitting there, looking at his phone. Rachel and Oliver joined us, sitting next to each other on the couch. I remained standing, feeling it was the right thing to do. I thought a lot during my vacation at Lauren's. I began about our situation, about how we've lived for the past 3 years, and about how I want to live from now on. Darla crossed her arms, clearly preparing to defend herself. Terrence looked alarmed. And I've come to the conclusion that this can't go on, I said, taking the eviction notice out of my pocket. So, I've made a decision. I handed the envelope to Terrence. He slowly opened it, read the contents, and his face turned white. What's that? Darla snatched the paper from his hands and quickly scanned the text. What is this nonsense? An eviction notice. Are you kidding? No, Darla. I shook my head. I've never been more serious. You can't evict us. She crumpled the paper. This is our home. No. I looked calmly into her eyes. This is my home. I've been paying the mortgage on it for 38 years. I let you in here 3 years ago out of compassion. But you've turned my hospitality into a right to boss me around. Darla looked as if she had been hit. We boss you around. She laughed, but there was no joy in it. We take care of you. We feed you. Clean up after you. Do your laundry. No, Darla. I shook my head. I cook meals for the entire family. I clean the apartment. I do your laundry. And in return, You call me an old burden and try to evict me from my own bedroom. Darla opened her mouth to argue, but couldn't think of a response. Mom. Terrence finally found his voice. Let's discuss this. I'm sure we can work something out. Work something out, Terrence. I looked at my son. I've been compromising for 3 years. I've given in on everything, from the placement of the kitchen utensils to the TV viewing schedule. I kept quiet when Darla insulted me, rummaged through my things, and belittled my feelings. I put up with you gambling away your money instead of saving for a place of your own. I let you think this was your home, even though the mortgage payments were coming out of my account the whole time. Terrence hung his head, acknowledging the truth of my words. And you know what's the saddest part? I continued. I did it out of love. Because you're my family. But I've recently realized that real love isn't letting others treat you like a doormat. Real love is setting healthy boundaries and demanding respect. And that's why you're kicking us out. Darla's voice was bitter. Your only son and grandchildren. I'm giving you 30 days to find another place to live, I replied. That's more than the law requires, and I'm willing to help with the first month's rent if you need it. How generous. Darla snorted. Have you thought about the children? They'll have to change schools, friends. Actually, I looked at Rachel and Oliver. I wanted to offer them to stay with me, if they want to. There are rooms available, plenty of space. What? Darla jumped up. You want to split up our family? No. I shook my head. I'm offering them a choice. Rachel is 17. She'll be graduating from high school in a year. Oliver is 14. He's old enough to make his own decisions. If they want to stay with you, I'll understand. If they want to stay here, our door is always open. Darla turned to the children. Did you hear that madness? She wants to destroy our family. Rachel exchanged glances with her brother. Mom, no one is destroying the family, she said quietly. Grandma just wants to be treated with respect, and I understand her. So, you on her side? Darla narrowed her eyes. After everything we've done for you. I'm not taking sides, Rachel straightened up. But I've seen how you've treated Grandma all these years, and it's not right. Darla looked at Oliver. What about you? Are you going to betray your own parents, too? Oliver, who had been silent until then, sighed. Mom, stop being so dramatic. No one is betraying anyone. Grandma is right. This is her home. And you and Dad, you weren't very nice to her. Darla looked as if everyone she loved had betrayed her. She turned to Terrence for support, but he was staring at the floor, clearly unwilling to get involved. Fine, she finally said. Just fine. So, that's how it's going to be. Well, Marlene, you win. We'll move out like you want, but don't think we'll still be a family after that. We'll always be a family, I replied. But now on my terms, with mutual respect and healthy boundaries. Darla snorted, grabbed her bag, and stormed out, slamming the door. Terrence sat there for a few more seconds, then sighed heavily and followed her, as always, choosing the path of least resistance. The three of us remained, me and my grandchildren. There was a silence broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Grandma, Rachel finally said, are you sure you don't mind if we stay with you? Of course not. I smiled. This is your home as much as it is mine. But it's your decision. They exchanged glances, silently communicating. I'll stay, Rachel said firmly. At least until I finish school, then we'll see. Me, too. Oliver nodded. The internet's good for gaming, hey? I laughed, feeling genuine relief for the first time in a long time. Then it's settled. We'll manage together. They went to their rooms, Rachel to prepare for tomorrow's test, Oliver to his virtual battles. I remained in the living room, staring at the closed door behind which Terrence and Darla had disappeared. I knew they would return to collect their things, talk to the children, perhaps try to change my mind. But I would not change my decision. Enough concessions. Enough compromises at the expense of my own dignity. I walked over to the record shelf in the living room, the very collection Edward and I had spent a lifetime putting together, and that Darla wanted to throw away. I ran my fingers along the spines, looking for a particular one. There it was, Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, Edward's favorite album. I carefully took the record out of its sleeve and placed it on the turntable. The soft, melancholic sounds of the trumpet filled the room. I closed my eyes, allowing the music to envelop me, to take me back to the days when Edward and I would sit here in the evenings, holding hands and dreaming of the future. You would be proud of me, I said to him in my mind. I finally stood up for myself. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Terence might be offended. Darla would surely harbor resentment, and even my grandchildren might reconsider their decision to stay with me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life, that I wasn't a ghost in my own home, but its rightful owner. I opened my eyes and smiled as I looked at the familiar walls, the photographs on the mantelpiece, the cozy armchairs where we used to sit as a family. This house had seen so many stories, happy and sad, ordinary and extraordinary. And now a new chapter was beginning. My chapter. I turned up the volume a little and began to move to the beat of the music, slowly, uncertainly at first, but gradually more freely. I hadn't danced in how long? 5 years. Not since Edward passed away. But my body remembered the movements, the rhythm, the feeling of freedom that the music gave me. I spun around the living room, letting the sounds of Miles Davis's trumpet lead me, just as Edward had once led me in dance. And with every step, with every turn, I felt the weight of years of humiliation and self-denial fall from my shoulders. This was my home, my life, and I had finally regained the right to control it. When the record ended, I stopped in the middle of the room, feeling slightly out of breath and pleasantly tired. For the first time in a long time, I smiled effortlessly, without needing to hide my true feelings. Rachel was standing in the doorway, watching me with a tender smile. "You were dancing, Mom," she said. "I haven't seen you dance since Grandpa." "Yes," I nodded. "It's time to remember how to do it." She came over and hugged me. "I'm glad you're back," she whispered. "The real you." I hugged her tightly in return, knowing what she meant. I really was back. Not just back to this apartment, but back to myself. To the Marlene Ricks who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. And this Marlene wasn't going anywhere. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you felt completely taken advantage of by family? What would you have done if your own home was no longer your sanctuary? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.